thank you for being here on truly a historic day where we get to honor not only one of our own from the St. Paul Police Department, but what I will call her a sister of the saintly city, a dear friend of mine, and someone who I've always looked up to, Deborah Montgomery. And you're going to see in a little bit here a tribute to Deborah that will stay here. She's a pretty lucky gal. I mean, a little more than a year ago, they named a street after her. Now we're going to do an unveiling here today. And Deb and I were in Memphis, Tennessee last week for a group called the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Association. It was our 25th annual conference, 550 attendees. And I will tell you that Deb continues to be an ambassador, not just for the St. Paul Police Department, but for our city, the city of St. Paul, because I swear to you, and I truly mean this, 399 of the 550 people knew Debbie Montgomery. Because she brought me everywhere and introduced me to all these people. And I thought I knew a lot of chiefs and sheriffs, but Debbie truly does. As we all know here, Debbie became a St. Paul police officer on September 8th, 1975, setting a trail in a history that had never been set for the city of St. Paul and the St. Paul Police Department before. Not only was she the first female police officer for the city of St. Paul and the St. Paul Police Department, but she was the first African-American female as well. She has been a mentor and a role model throughout her career, and even as we speak today, she's been retired since 2003, continuing to be a role model for not just women, but students in general to come to work in our field. A little bit about Debbie. Again, she was appointed as an emergency police officer August 18th of 1975, and then certified as a police officer September 8th of 1975. Debbie's had numerous assignments with the St. Paul Police Department. She was promoted to sergeant in 1987, and then she went on and she left us for a while. But again, to be an ambassador now, not just for the city of St. Paul, but the state of Minnesota as an assistant commissioner with the Department of Public Safety. And we missed her. We missed her a lot. And she came back to us in January of 1998, and then went on to be promoted to lieutenant in 1998. She then was moved up to the rank of commander and retired as a senior commander for the St. Paul Police Department. One quick story. I was a young cop, and I've got some of my classmates here, Assistant Chief Axtell and Matt Topol, and we've got Dan Malmgren back there. And I was working in this district one busy night. I won't say what year, but Debbie happened to get put on midnights for a little bit on patrol in another district, Central District, and I worked the Northwest team at the time. And there was this frantic call on the radio of a big street brawl in the middle of Rice Street. And it was all garbled, and they're like calling for all cars to come and assist. I was working with a partner. We actually had a prisoner in our back seat, but it sounded really bad. And you know, we were young, and back then we were told you don't drive to another call with a prisoner in your back seat, but we decided to do that anyway. Because when Debbie Montgomery calls, we come a-running. So we get there, and it's the old Horseshoe Bar. And in the middle of Rice Street is a battle, literally. People spilling out of this bar and fighting with everybody, swearing at the police. And right up in front was my dear friend and then sergeant, I was just an officer, Debbie Montgomery. And Debbie did a wonderful job. She actually gave all of us direction, and I'm like, this is the first time I really got to know Debbie because she was cool. She did not take any crap from anybody. And being a first, working her way up through a department of all men for a long time was not easy. So Debbie knew when we were in the middle of that battle, and we did call it a battle because it truly was, she took charge. She put us in a line. We got the people to disperse. We arrested a few people, and we were finally done. And I thought, this is one cool lady. Because even when we got hired here, there were not a lot of females on our police department. So Debbie's done a wonderful job. Again, she is truly an ambassador of our city. She has been for so long. She has a fantastic family. Her husband Robert's here, her sons, family of law enforcement, good people, And you know what? I will tell you this, in all of my travels, and I have met thousands of people in my career, not just as a chief of police, but throughout my career. I've traveled all over. I have never, ever, ever heard one person say anything bad about Debbie Montgomery, ever. And that says a lot. And she continues to be, like I said, our ambassador, retired 13 years, still going to law enforcement conferences. Last year she was at ICP and wherever I go. Sometimes Robert's there, sometimes not, but she is promoting our city and continuing to make sure that law enforcement is looked at in a positive light. So with that, I want to bring another person up here to say a few words about Debbie, because I believe it might have been her first partner, Tim Bradley, retired St. Paul Police Department. Tim, will you come up?
Anybody that knows me is now looking at their watch and know it's going to be short, so get over it, okay? I'm honored to be here today, and this is a very important day because Debbie really deserves this. I want you to imagine the first female stepping into the first day of the academy with 49 triple class A testosterone-driven males and saying, I can do this. And the whole time, she did it. And Debbie kept her wit about her, and she wanted the job very, very badly, to the point where when we were out jogging one day downtown, because we ran as a unit, 50 of us, can you imagine that? 50 cadets running proudly 2 and 2. And Debbie ate a parking meter, you know. I don't know, how many teeth did you loosen up or whatever? But it was interesting. But she right back to class, didn't go into the whining or anything. Debbie was in it for the long haul, and she wanted to be a St. Paul police officer more than anything. So her first assignment was in a squad car with me, and if you can imagine, retired Deputy Chief Dick Gardell. What had she done wrong to deserve that kind of partnership? I'll never know. But again, she didn't complain about it. But here's some interesting things about it. In 1975, if you were familiar with the squad cars, not only in the wintertime did the red lights freeze up and you had to get out with your nightstick and tap it to get it to go around, but they had bench seats in them. So if your partner had a different leg length, you had to adjust the passenger side to the same thing. We split the shift. Half the shift you wrote reports and the other person drove, and then you switched out. When Debbie drove, I had to open the glove box up to put my knees in it. Okay. But we were good partners. We didn't complain about it. In Minnesota, there is construction season, and then there's winter, right? Well, Debbie's season is longer than any season that there possibly is. And that season is when she wears long underwear, okay? State fair time is when Debbie suits up, and to be honest with you, within the week right now is when she changed back out. So long underwear is pretty much the uniform of the day. One more quick story and then I'm out of here. So Debbie's working alone one night, and we've got this perp out there, had done this fresh felony, and she's out there and she's hot on the trail. And it had snowed out really heavily. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so Debbie gets on the air and she goes, I think, were you 217 or 212 or something? 211. Yeah, squad 211. I think I got a fresh track here. So all of a sudden you hear her running. She goes, oh, I think I can spot a jacket. She gets up a little closer. She goes, there's a hat on top of the jacket. And then you hear, hey, there's a guy inside the jacket. And then she says, real calmly, he's in custody. You know? But it was fantastic because she just and she was so calm about it, and it was great. So I'm here today, along with everybody else, to honor you and your commitment to the city of St. Paul. I know you love this city dearly. You've proven it throughout the time, and I just appreciate the fact that I could be here with you. And this is a tribute that you deserve. So thank you.
But I did want to mention one thing about this running into the parking meter. If the truth were to be known, now that academy was being held at the National Guard Armory on Cedar Street. When they'd go out for their run, the doors would open up and out they'd go, crossing Cedar and heading up towards the cathedral. Debbie was the only one that turned to look for the traffic. Consequently, she ran right into the parking meter. But she could keep up with the guys. Let me tell you, when Debbie came on the job, she was well prepared. Not only did she already have her baccalaureate degree, in hand, but she was well on the way towards her master's degree. Physically speaking, she was a damn good softball player. She had worked in the mayor's office in other staff positions for probably about 7 years before she actually came to the police department. She took the test kind of as a testing the system. But she took the test and she passed high. All parts of the test she tested high, including the physical part. She went into the academy, and in the academy we opted for school teachers could come and assist study groups if they wanted help. Debbie formed a study group. They didn't need any help. In the end, her group did just as well as any of the other study groups that had the assistance of the school teachers that we hired, to help. Debbie worked for me out on Rice Street. Never had a problem with Debbie. Keep in mind that as Debbie came to the police department and coming up through the ranks, she was also raising a family. At one point in time, she had a son on the St. Paul Police Department. She had a son in that other department across the river. And she also had a son who was a deputy sheriff in Prince George County, right outside of D.C. And a daughter, I understand, that has a choice job on the East Coast now in the baking industry. They were all successful kids. But Debbie raised these kids while working rotating shifts, and once we went to permanent shifts, working midnights, raising this family. Bob Sr., after he finished his career and seeing all his wife and all the sons in law enforcement, decided, hey, this can't be all bad. Well, he was too old to go into law enforcement as far as any city and going through the academies, but he did go to work for Minnesota Mining in security for a whole second career. And I guess what I'm saying is, here's Debbie Montgomery, the first female who was recruited, hired, and trained into the police uniform patrol position, raising a family all at the same time. Debbie, congratulations.
Well, it's time. Final comments real quick are, we all love Debbie and Robert. You guys not only, again, live in St. Paul, Debbie being the first. History's a big thing for me. It is for our younger officers, too, to pass down generations of people that, again, have set the tone and trailblazed our department. You can look all around this room and see all about St. Paul Police Department's history. But we wait no longer. Let us now unveil another part of history and someone who we can all give a loud round of applause to as soon as we get the curtain. Let's do it here.
There you go.
And there we go.
Thank you so very much for everybody coming, and I can't say enough about the experience of having to serve on the best department in the state of Minnesota and with the best officers that exist in public safety. This department has been very committed the whole time I've been on it to doing community policing. We've been about the community, we stay engaged with the community, and that's the reason we don't have as many problems as we may see in other areas. I can't say enough about the leadership. Chief Smith, he has been phenomenal. He's done a wonderful job, and he stayed connected to all of the different communities. His staff has stayed connected, and our officers have stayed connected. You've heard some of the stories that I've engaged in during my career, but when I look back, I really didn't go into law enforcement. I was a city planner by profession. So that's what I was doing before I got here. And yet when I look back, I couldn't have found a better profession to go into. My heart is in it. Our family has been a public service family all of the time. It's all about public service. And I always tell my students when I talk to them, you're going into this job not to be a cop, constable on patrol. You're going into this job to be a public servant with an emphasis on servant. And that's what we're about, serving the public. You know, and they're going to tell you they pay your salary. Yeah, they do pay your salary. But you need to deal with those people that pay your salary in a respectful manner. And that's what this department has been about. I have been blessed to work with the greatest staff. I really mean that. And I can't say enough, and I appreciate all the people that showed up today. I see my legislative aide, Renee Tyler, when I was on the city council. She helped me so that we could get this building built on my watch while I was on the city council, so I'm really happy about that. I want to thank the St. Paul Police Historical Society for having my picture put in this great room. I'm just honored to be part of the history of this department. And I just don't know, I'm very pleased, not so much for me, but for this city and the police department that we have and how representative we are of all of the city. I see Jimmy Yang here from the Asian Officers Association, John Lazoya from the Latino Officers Association, the Black Officers Association, and my dear friend Brian Turner from the FBI. So and Tyrone from the African American Leadership Council. So I don't want to point out people, but I mean, that's what this city's about. It's bringing people together, getting to understand everybody, to understand the issues. Every community has differences. How do we engage with those communities? How do we bring them to the forefront, let them know that they are part of this society and not an extension of it in the bad sense? So with that being said, I just want you to know that it's a great honor for me to be here today and to have this portrait of mine. You notice that beautiful blonde streak in there. I'll just give you a little story about that. What happened was, you know, when you go into a paramilitary organization, you have to have a short haircut, and as you can tell, my hair has always been short. And when I put on the uniform, back then they didn't have a women's uniform, so they had to tailor a uniform for me to get into, which was a full-time job on Saturday, the weekend before the academy started. And here they put this hat on me, and they give me this shirt that's too big and the tie that's too long. And every time I sat down, I always said it was a health hazard. Every time I sat down, the tie's in the toilet, and I'm trying to keep the tie out of the toilet. I mean, it's unbelievable. But the thing that was so interesting is every time I stopped and pulled the car over and I'm talking to the driver, it was, yes, sir, yes, sir. I said, I'm a ma'am. Yes, sir, yes. No, I'm a ma'am. And I got so tired of hearing it that I went and got a wig. And I said, well, wait a minute, I got to blend in with the rest of the department, so I need a little blonde. So I got a little blonde. And so then they stopped calling me sir. But it was so interesting because my mentor on this job was Carolyn Bailey. I mean, I can't say enough about Carolyn. She took me under her wing when I came on the department. She was a policewoman. And the first thing she did was went to the chief. I mean, I hadn't even been on the job that long. And she said, I want to take her to the International Association of Women Police Conference. And so she drags me out to Seattle. And back then, all of the women police, they weren't women police, they were police women. And so here me and one other woman who was actually a police officer are there with these older women, and they're telling and sharing their stories. And they were so excited to have us because we were police officers. And to hear, you know, I'm just a rookie at the time, and to hear the stories that we went through. So that was an interesting piece. But what was more important was when she got me engaged in that, it gave me the opportunity to grow with women coming up in law enforcement all around the world. And I was able to see law enforcement and women in China, where they would only let them direct traffic, in Russia, where they didn't let them do anything but paperwork. I mean, and just to see that, and we were teaching them self-defense tactics and things like that. And so it was just nice to see the growth of women in law enforcement. And it was a big part of my life, and I'll never forget her for the work that she did to get me engaged in that. So I just want to make sure that I acknowledge her, because I wouldn't be the woman that I am today without the support of her, because there were a lot of battles that were being fought that I didn't know about, that she was fighting behind the scenes. So I just want to make sure that you know that. And I can't say enough about Captain Steenberg, Captain Eckwall, Mayor Larry Cohen. He's the one that connived me into this job. He said, I just need you to go do me a favor. Just go for a little while. And 28 years later. But I just can't say enough. And I'm so honored to be part of this department and this profession. And I will continue to do everything I can for this city. I was born and raised here. I've moved 1/2 block from the house I was born and raised in. My kids grew up in the inner city. They turned out okay, even with a mother working midnights. And so I just want to thank you to the St. Paul Police Department, the St. Paul Police Historical Society, Chief Smith, and all of you that came. Thank you so much.
One last thing for all of you, and Debbie, you can stay here because this is about Debbie. Number one quick funnier story is when I was a SWAT commander, we ended up doing a search warrant across the street from Debbie's house. And it was like 5 in the morning because we had some bad guys, and Debbie had told me about it, and we needed to get them out. And we actually went outside and we threw what people would call a flashbang outside, for a distraction device, and then we went inside. And because the commander, I stay outside to make sure and kind of coordinate things. And one of the sergeants came up and said, "Hey, Commander, there's some woman out in a nightgown across the street." Anyway, that person in the nightgown was Debbie standing across the street, and I had to kind of make sure that she went back inside.
With gun in hand.
With gun in hand. But the final thing is, last year I had the distinct privilege of going along with, Paul Iovino, down to the 50th anniversary of the historic march over the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And Debbie was part of that. I actually got to march across the bridge with Debbie. For those of you that don't know, at the tender age of 20 or 21, Debbie was already a trailblazer. I mean, she was the president of the junior branch of the NAACP right here, and has met and been in the company of historic figures like Thurgood Marshall and so many others. And she marched across that bridge 50 years previous to last year. And last year, again, marched across that bridge. So not only did she set a trailblaze for the St. Paul Police Department and for the women and others in our community, but she has been a consistent fighter for civil rights, both here, sometimes even saying, hey, we got to change things within the police department, with our organization. I just wanted everybody to know that because her and her husband have continued to do those things after all these years when they could sit back and just relax, and they do a lot of traveling. I won't even say how. She went to Cuba before. I think you can go to Cuba legally now. I could tell you a story about her and Robert. I don't know, but I won't tell you that because I don't want her to get arrested. So, but thank you for always doing that. Thank you. We love you, and let's have cake and coffee, and please come up and congratulate Debbie. Thank you for being here.